Good afternoon, and good afternoon to my guests, Professor Priscilla Daniels, the Director of our Community Engagement Unit. Welcome, Priscilla.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Professor Ajayi Ngece. Welcome. A chemistry professor and a former winner of the Community Engagement Excellence Award at UWC. Welcome.
Thank you.
Professor Moenieba Isaacs, very senior academic and class at UWC, former winner as well of the Community Engagement Award, Excellence Award. Welcome.
Thank you.
UWC has a very interesting history. This year we're celebrating 60 years of UWC, and in thinking it through, one can identify a few seasons of UWC. It started as an apartheid legacy institution destined just for people of a certain ethnic group, namely colored people at the time, as they were classified, and only for certain disciplines. So you were supposed to be a teacher, preacher, etc. Other disciplines such as medicine and engineering and all of those things were not destined for UWC. So that season of the formation of UWC is probably not the best part of our history. But what was very interesting in the following season, the next 10 years of UWC, was a growing resistance to the ideology that actually led to this institution being established. And so we see a rise of black consciousness and a resistance of the institution being only for colored people. And so in the 80s, that resistance grew. The university became known as the intellectual home of the left. And so it created for itself an identity of almost what people would call hardigheid. You know, that chutzpah, that not just taking anything just on face value. And one saw the rise of that quite profoundly in the 80s. In the 90s, I would characterize that season as the period of preparation for the next leadership in the country. So a lot of the exiles came to UWC. It was the time when the Constitution of South Africa was drafted at UWC. The real input into the creation of a new democracy in South Africa happened at UWC. It was actually a sad period because then after 94, even the former rector, he was taken up into government, Prof. Jakes Gerwel. And that was a period of loss because there was intellectual drain. Student numbers dropped to about 8,000, if I remember correctly. And the university was practically bankrupt in the early 2000s, which led to a period of where the university had to be recapitalized. And it's amazing to see then in the later 2000s until where we are now, the total consolidation of the university firstly, and now the university becoming a research-led teaching university that makes a difference in the country, in the continent, and globally. In recent conversations that I've had, I had a whole series of courageous conversations with alumni over the period of 2017, 2018. And I asked them, so what do you think the intellectual identity of UWC was at the time when you were there? And what about that intellectual identity was so important to you that you think we should hold on to it, and what should the future be? So what do we take into the future? And one of the elements that came out the strongest was that UWC was always a university where social justice matters. It's embedded in our DNA and how we deal with our communities, how we engage with our communities. So us having this conversation today is me asking you about community engagement that's so part of the DNA of UWC.
I studied human ecology and dietetics in the community and health sciences faculty. And I think that's where my love started because a big part of our work was working in the community. So for the nutrition, we worked in the primary health care clinics. We did a lot of outreach projects in Mitchell's Plain. We worked in housing projects. So I really became interested in it, and because my major was really in family studies and working with families, I realized that in actual fact, families are the core, and when we start having problems in communities, it's because families are struggling to keep their relationships healthy and to be able to provide support for the family members. A lot of the work that was being done, specifically in community engagement linked to curriculum, was done more in the health sciences. Then I think the idea was that it should be expanded to other faculties, because those faculties are just as important, and they may be doing just as amazing work. And so we decided, okay, at that time I think it was Professor Bharatram that was the person I was answering to. And then we said, okay, let's start on a database and see what's really happening, and then see how we can provide support. And I think that was really the start of where we started identifying all the amazing things that people are doing. We have 140 projects. We have a database report every year. I think what I wanted to mention is that I think now the staff know that Pearl September is going to call them, and they update their projects. And we've had so many people being able to build partnerships, and now we can refer people, and students call us and say, oh, they want to do research, who must they talk to? Then we refer them to the database. So I think the nice thing about that is that there is now a space where if people want to know what UWC is doing, they can go there. We are now able to say how many hours does students and staff give in service without being paid. And I think that's also important, so that people can see we don't just use taxpayers' money. The university is committed to be able to give back to the community. So I think that's one of the things that I really want to highlight that I think is amazing. What's wonderful about what the university does do now is that we do create partnerships. And when you have a partnership, because when you're working with students, we all realize that universities work according to timelines. They've got semesters, and so they can't stay and they can't sustain. But if you create a partnership with a community organization or with a service provider in the community, and you ensure that you build that organization and leave them with skills and in the sense that they can continue with the service, then you've done something that will ensure that we have sustainable communities. I have to acknowledge that community engagement is expensive. It is not, and we do not get funded as an institution for that part of our work. So the university also has to find the money to be able to do that. And so I salute the university in that sense that we always find money to be able to support some of these things. And also I feel the academics and the students go out of their way to find alternative forms of funding. I think we've become very resourceful as a university and as academics in terms of if we're really committed to doing something to find the funds for it.
The award was such a huge honor, and I want to thank you for starting that at UWC, because I didn't even know there was a word called community engagement, let alone community outreach. It's only when I was forced to sit down and write for the award during the application process that I then understood what the difference is and to actually put a word to what I was doing. But when I look back, I've always really loved being with people. Although I wanted to be on television as a child and be an actor and all of that, but that didn't happen. So just like you, Prof. Isaacs, it became an accident being a scientist. But when I got here as a student, it was a very pleasant journey. And when people talk about community engagement being at the DNA of UWC, I'm living proof of that, because I had lecturers pay for my bus ticket and my train tickets to get to school. So that is their way of giving a student they don't know a chance to travel from Khayelitsha and to come to university and to get trained, and they believe in you. It's a blessing to be educated in South Africa. It is a blessing to come from a township and to call yourself an associate professor, it is a blessing because people still ask you how, as if there's muti or you've gone through some kind of cleansing in order for you to be, because they don't understand how did you leave this community and become the person that you are. So I feel it's a responsibility for me, and I keep encouraging my friends and colleagues that you are here, it is a privilege. You are in the best position ever of changing people's lives. So why don't we then do this often? Why don't we do it all the time? This is a need, and it's something that we're supposed to do. So I felt coming here and being supported so much by my lecturers and later being supported by colleagues to become much more stronger as a chemist was a blessing. So why don't I give it back? And that's what I've decided that I was going to do. So as these students were coming in from different schools around the Cape Flats, there was a common problem from year to year in the sense that they all feared the lab. They wanted to become scientists, but they feared the lab. They had never been in a lab environment. They had never seen a lecturer that looks like them, let alone being young, but also somebody who comes from their community. That was the first part. The second part was at third year and honors level, you have people who are ready to go into the world and work, yet they're not confident enough. They feel that they're not really well equipped. And this is an emotional thing because it comes from home, it comes from the community in which they come from. That yes, you are a scientist, but you don't dress like a scientist. You still don't have money. You're the same as us. So that's when I started to go and bring science to the community and talk to young people that irrespective of where you come from, you can still be the person that you dream of. But that already translates into recruitment from the university and also equip them with skills that they do need when they do enter the lab. So they've already seen a beaker, they've seen chemicals at grade 10 already. So when they come, they are more confident, they are more sure that I want to do chemical sciences or I want to do biological sciences, or I want to do pharmacy. It's already clear. This is not something I had growing up. And I tell people that I feel that it is my heart and the community work that has really put depth into my teaching. It has put depth into my research because you can't start a project without understanding what is TB. We need to go to a hospice. You need to see what you're talking about. You need to understand what the drugs of a TB patient does, or a HIV patient. What does the drug do to them? So if you're coming up with a solution and innovation to treat TB or HIV, you must see what the disease looks like, what the treatment looks like. Where are these people? Where do they live? What do they eat? Who do they talk to? You know, what social setting do they come from? So it has really changed my life in that way. And I feel that it's not something I'm going to stop. It's not just a one-time wonder, but it's a responsibility. I feel that more young girls from Khayelitsha, more young girls from Mitchell's Plain, all across the Cape Flats, more, even young boys, everybody, every child needs to be educated, and I feel it's my responsibility to do so.
UWC for me is a space where I find my intellectual home, and I also find my political home, and I also find my academic home. So I find that UWC is in my DNA. So I don't see myself separated from the institution. Now, going back into the community, I find that it is critical for me to articulate those stories that I see. You know, when you deal with fishing and fishers, you think fishermen. And that was for a long time that I find that often, like community engagement, you think that it is an add-on. Women plays a central role in the fishing activity. Their role is mainly in the pre-harvest. They prepare when their partners, their husbands, their sons go to fish. And when they come back after a number of hours, they're exhausted, the woman takes over and they do the marketing, and they're the ones that carry the marketing and the livelihoods and all of that together. So for me, women played always a core part in the fishing activity. I was called by a fisherwoman and she said to me, you know, I've been struggling to get my rights and I can't find my fishing rights. I can't find to access my fishing rights, and this is the reason. Her name is Fatima Poppy Cook, and she explained to me vividly how she, as a teenager, went out to fishing, actively fishing. And if you know how aggressive a snook is, it's very tasty, but it's also an aggressive fish to kind of break the neck. And she kind of explained to me how she did that, and that for me is somebody that is really a true fisher. But then because of a technicality that she submitted her application too late, the government fisheries department just ignored her application and said that no, she needs to wait for another 3 years. Her whole life, her whole livelihood, her whole existence down the drain. My other challenge that I find is, which links me to the other story, is that they are often seen as the poacher, the illegal fisher. This is the story that has been portrayed by small-scale fishers who are struggling to access their rights, are struggling to access the resource or access their livelihoods and their food security, a whole package for social justice. And that's why I'm at UWC, because UWC gives me that space to articulate their rights and access to the story. So for me, I'm trying to link the social justice as a concept and a practice and an advocacy tool, but also to kind of understand that concept in the space of the ocean by calling it blue justice. And now blue justice is just the next topic internationally. Everybody is driving blue justice. Everybody's talking about blue justice. While I'm still thinking about how to conceptualize it and how to make this a South African concept, a South African story, others are running away with the concept.
Today we had an amazing conversation. I want to thank the three of you around community engagement and the scholarship of community engagement, how community engagement is really the glue, as Priscilla has called it, that's infused with our learning and teaching and our scholarly work, our research. So as we're celebrating our 60 years as UWC, but also celebrating and thinking through, in a sense, a new institutional operating plan. It is my wish that community engagement, it might not be a separate goal, and it should never be a separate goal, but it should be infused in everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.